Tribute's three best-selling binding brands.
Yeah. Tributes. I'm overthinking it so much.
Yeah, I know.
We'll do that later. We'll do that later.
Welcome to the Tribute Lounge. I'm Mark Fawcett.
I'm Shane Johnson.
And today we're diving deep into the Freeride all mountain bindings that we have here at Tribute. Our top three brands, Burton, Union, Jones.
So the common denominator with these three is they're a medium plus flex. So some of the brands will call it a 8 out of 10. These guys will say it's a medium. These guys will say whatever. But for the sake of this conversation, you know, these fit into that realm. They're going to be surfy enough that I'm going to enjoy them in powder. They're going to be powerful enough that this guy can hammer, you know, a carve that's that deep. And it's going to kind of fit into a sub $500 price point too. Nothing's beyond that in Canadian money.
In Canadian dollars, yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, ranging from the Jones here, the Mercury at $425. The Burton Genesis at $450, and this is right on
that's
$499.99. So one penny below your $500 threshold.
Well, it's a pro model binding too, so you know Travis might have something to do with it.
Yeah.
One cool thing with these as we spin them around, they're all inject mold straps, and that's right here. What we found over the years when everything changed from I used to really like a premium leather strap. When we changed to this, there was a curious thing that happened. I wasn't getting foot cramping and I wasn't getting cold feet. And a lot of it is, the lack of things pressing on you. So in all cases, they're kind of milled out here and there, but it does relieve a lot of pressure on that main artery that's supplying your foot with warm blood. So I found that curious. They're also really comfy, and medial lateral movement on all of these is, it's responsive. It's really.
And within the production process, I mean, we'll see a lot of binding companies doing this as well. There's no waste. When you make a leather strap or any sort of textile strap, there's all sorts of cuttings and trimmings and stuff that just end up in the landfill. These are all injected molded. The material goes in and it's finished.
Yeah, there's nothing lying on the floor to then make it to a landfill. So
I think the other thing we noticed that was very common through the whole lineup was easy access. They all open up nice and wide for you to be able to jump into.
Everything's staying out of the way. This one needs to be flexed a little bit more. But, for the most part, we're not stepping on stuff. There was, for years, and especially in the 90s and 2000s, you'd be stepping all over that junk, and it kind of would drive you crazy and slow you down when you wanted to
be shrouding.
Now when we get into the base plate or the footbed, where a lot of the absorption's coming from, your suspension system as well as comfort. The Union, what I really love about this, MiniDisc. So this is a smaller dead zone on your snowboard. You really notice it once you try these. You get riding it and you just ollie power, and you feel the board free flex just a percentage better. It is noticeable. It's not a gimmick. It really is a noticeable part. Also with the Falcor, it is canted. I don't know exactly what the degrees, but it is canted, and for me, I really appreciate that. It's, again, noticeable, and it's a feature I think is very valuable.
Yeah, especially for people running wider stances and such. Yeah. One other funny little thing with the MiniDisc, if you like to ride those wider stances, you can jack way out there off the front. You don't need that extra set of holes in front or in back to get the binding.
Slide it way out there.
So you can slide it to the really extremes of the stance options. Those guys that
want a 26-inch stance, you
27, 28.
Yeah, you might be able to get some crazy stances out of that.
Yeah.
The Burton has a system called Autocant, and they're changing the durometer of foam, so you kind of sink into this one. It's much softer in here than it is on the outside, and that also, achieves almost the same goal. The now/Jones binding has a bunch of wild features. Like, you know, what are these?
So this is their proprietary system, and this is what the whole binding was developed around, is skate tech. So it's actually an entire mechanical system here where there's an axle and pivot point up high, and this whole area where the disc sits into can pivot. And it actually stays firm against the board, and the rest of the binding can slightly flex and pivot fore and aft around it. And that gives you a really surfy feel. For sure, it eliminates a lot of chatter or how much any chatter really gets driven into your feet. Adjustability wise, there are different durometer bushings. It comes with a couple sets of bushings here. So you can adapt if you want the surfy feel or the Freeride feel that's a little stiffer and more responsive. In addition, the straps are asymmetrical. So if you switch it around, they come in the surfy mode. If you switch the straps from left to right, you end up with them in the Freeride mode where there's like 3/4 of an inch more stiff material in that section of pocket that you're driving. So really interesting. They've won some awards with this at ISPO and such.
It's a cool function.
It's
really
cool
neat
to
have that, because some guys might even want, you know, surf on the back leg, power on the front leg. You can change your durometer here to just have the front soft, the back harder. The adjustability is really quite cool, and if you want to really nerd into it.
Yeah, I mean, in basics, Jones and Now do this structurally, like with physics. Union do it with their material, and Burton also does it with material, and they have a B3 in the back here, a little spot.
B3 gel, right under the heel, yeah.
So just for those people that get bruised heels, there's a little bit of extra squish there.
We should probably next go to the high back. I've ridden the Genesis quite a bit, so I'm a bit more familiar, especially with this high back and the hammock system. I forget exactly what it's called, but
kickback hammock. And what's visually noticeable on that is the kickback hammock.
It acts as a compression system as well. It is a suspension system for the back, you know, just under your calf muscle, really. And I really do like it. I really do notice it. It's not gimmicky. This does work, because it is a stiff high back out here, but this allows it to be comfortable and give me more of that surfy feel where I don't want absolute immediate. This has just a subtle delay because it compresses with you, but if it's chattery, that really activates, and it does help, and it actually smooths out your heel side turn. So that's something I've always really loved about this binding. Toe cap too to note on this one is the 2.0 came out, I think 3 years ago now, and this is just a massive improvement on what the old one was.
Yeah.
You've ridden the Falcor though, this high back.
Yeah, so for a guy that likes power, performance, and precision, and you know, it's a surgical tool, and when you tip your boot into this thing, up the board goes. It's great. And so what they've done, this whole binding is based around being super minimalistic. It's Travis's binding. This is a proprietary carbon. Doesn't have it for me, but it is it's a.
We do a review on this binding. If you want to go back, he does.
Anyway, I do know what it's called. So they got a cool tech little name for it, but essentially it's forged carbon. Bam, forged carbon. So so this is a forged carbon Y-beam that really gives it the structure in the 3 points you need in the straight back vertical and in 45 laterals. Yeah. Surrounding that is their nylon composite, the rest of their high back that has a little bit of flex and give to hold and support the rest of your boot and make it more comfortable. And it's a really powerful binding for how light and minimal the binding is. It delivers a ton of power. The high back has just this nice little, I actually prefer it. I always travel with a little tool and stuff anyway, not to mention I set my forward leans and I keep them there. So this nice little minimalistic forward lean adjustment block. and 3D extruded aluminum heel cup that's adjustable. So that's where you get that fore and aft adjustment. And I've always been a fan, because I run pretty heavy front angle, rotatable high back. So you're able to rotate the high back into 2 different positions here, straight or rotated either which way. Burton has a similar, different but similar system in being able to rotate the high back.
Heel cup on this, one thing I'll note too, is I always find that Union has a good medial lateral power delivery because of this extruded aluminum. When you power into this binding, that heel cup is really driving energy throughout here. And it's one of those things that I find unique to Union. When I drive into a heel side turn, it's there, it's immediate, and it's, you know, it's not, you're not losing any energy transfer. It's very powerful. This heel cup's very interesting too, because I've actually ridden these without high backs. The heel cup's high enough that it cradles you just enough, and every once in a while, and I saw Craig do this a couple times and I thought it was really cool, he would take his front high back off. There was no front high back, and he was messing around at Bald Face once, and this binding kind of lends to actually working with that. Burton has the free back, which is the mini high back you can buy to do a similar thing. But it's one cool thing. I'm not sure that now definitely, you know, came out of the gates thinking that was the plan, but it worked. You could take it off the front, and you really get that open front leg though, and it's sketchy, but if there's enough pow, it definitely works.
Yeah, and that, just like looking purely at high back, they have a nice little adjustable, clean little forward lean block. And this binding of the 3 definitely being the most tweaky, surfy, a really comfortable, soft high back on this particular binding. They do have a more boosted sort of Freeride version above the Mercury.
Yeah, the Apollo.
The Apollo.
There is one above. This seems to be a little bit hotter in the shop, and it may be price influenced, but I think with the new inject mold straps, for value, this is a pretty killer binding.
I think in general, the way we've picked it out is probably the softest, the stiffest, and sort of in between.
Yeah, that would be my riding impression.
That would, from my riding all 3 of them, I think that's how I would really put it. And then there's benefits to all of that. You know, it's not always about you're paying top dollar, you're getting the stiffest thing.
No, exactly. And I think another key point that we should just call out is, you know, the fact that everybody's gone to these new straps. You know, value for what you're getting is, you know, if you have a 6-year-old binding, get rid of them. You need to get new bindings. In the last 2-3 years, there's been such a jump in tech that, and this, you know, being one of the keys to that, it's time for new bindings if that's the case.
It's a ratio of like comfort to responsiveness.
Oh, yeah,
and it used to be you only got responsiveness with extreme discomfort, and now we finally have like great responsiveness, even better than before, and they're more comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think, you know, when you look at these 3. There is going to be a guy for each of these bindings, but they really are utilitarian. They will free ride. They will, you know, you could take these to the bank slalom if you wanted to.
Absolutely.
Any of these, you might choose that one maybe over the rest.
For me, maybe. But other people like that loose feel, you know, depending on what their stance is, how stiff their boots are. A lot of people that run really stiff boots like a really soft binding. I run actually tight but softer boots, and I like a stiff binding.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no one binding fits all. We all know that. But it's good to have these conversations, talk about, especially we were noticing these 3, people were really keying into these 3 in the shop this year. So we figured we'd bring this down, have a chat about those, and you know, we'll probably present some snowboards in the same manner. These shootouts make sense. There's no clear winner here by any means, but 3 very, very good Freeride all mountain bindings presented here by Burton, Union, and Jones.